Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to outline exactly what study habits and techniques I've used so far in DPT school and found success using. Well, I do adapt my study techniques based on the course as well as the content being covered within that course, as you should as well. This is just the general technique that I tend to gravitate towards throughout my studying so far. So let's get into it, starting with what I do before lecture. As I'm preparing for lecture, I tend to start by looking at the Canvas page, which is the learning software that our school uses, just to kind of see what the plan is for the day, as well as do any of the pre-readings, videos, or other assignments to do beforehand, and then I try and look at the PowerPoint slides ahead of time, just doing a quick skim through to get an idea of exactly what content is being covered. When I have the time, I try and leave the skimming of the PowerPoint for just before class. That way it provides kind of a primer right before class to really get me in the mindset of exactly the content we're covering that day. When I do this, I also try to download the PowerPoint or other notes onto a note-taking app such as GoodNotes or Notability, just so that I have them prepared and ready for when I go to lecture. Once I'm done with all of this, I'm set to head to lecture. During lecture, I usually have my iPad at the ready and try and focus a majority of my attention on the professor as they're talking. Now, with my iPad, I make sure to follow along with the slides just so that I can keep track of things and really only take notes in one of three instances. The first of which is when the professor makes the classic "this will be on the exam" claim. When that happens, I make sure to draw a star on whatever slide or slides are pertaining to the subject that they just mentioned. Second, if the professor mentions any tricks to remembering particular bits of information, images which outline an important point, or anything else which may make long-term retention of content simpler, I will write it out on the slide it was mentioned on just to come back to later. Lastly, anytime a professor mentions something which confuses me or doesn't sit right in my brain, I will make a Q with a question mark on that slide and write out what part of the content confused me so that whenever the next break was in the lecture, or if I needed to email the professor later, I could make sure to have my questions answered. By taking notes in these three instances, I'm able to move into my independent studying with more confidence and be ready to prepare for the exam. My preparation for an exam tends to break down into two stages: an independent preparation and a group practice stage. During the independent practice stage, this normally starts about 2 to 4 weeks before an exam occurs. Now, I try to, whenever possible, do this as soon as possible, however, just so that I can get the most practice out of the material as I possibly can. In this stage, I begin studying by pulling up the learning objectives for the course in a new document and attempt to answer all of them using what I remember off the top of my head to start. Then I reference my PowerPoints and the notes from lecture, looking for those stars and additional notes I took, the textbook, as well as any other provided materials for the content. Once I have completed all of the learning objectives, then I move on to creating flashcards for all of the learning objectives. During this phase, I try to break down the learning objectives into digestible chunks to make sure that each flashcard doesn't have too much information on it, to make it more manageable to remember the information during practice. Depending on the type of content and the timeline in which I need to learn the material, I have used either Quizlet or Anki to make and practice my flashcards. At last, it's time to get some of the real studying in and practice those flashcards. Now, two of the things that I really like about this method overall is, first of all, by starting from the learning objectives, you kind of get a template and outline to really structure how you start your studying and make it really objective. Secondly, it's really nice because through all of the filling out the learning objectives after going through the lecture and hearing it, as well as then making the flashcards again and going through the material again, by the time you actually hit what you think is the real studying, you have actually been exposed to the material 3 or 4 times already. At this point, I start to transition from that independent preparation stage over to the group practice stage. Now, this tends to happen as I approach the week to 2 weeks before an exam, as I really hope to, at that point, know almost all of the content, or at least be very close to feeling confident on all of it, because this is where lots of the repetition, the drawing from memory really comes from, because I like to have my friends in the study group really start to test my knowledge without the use of my notes. So maybe during the first week or during the first half of the week, depending on when my preparation starts, I tend to maybe look at my notes occasionally as I'm going through it, but really push myself not to touch them. And hopefully, the closer and closer that I get to the exam, I really leave my notes to the side and try and draw everything from my brain. Giving yourself these 1 to 2 weeks before the actual exam day provides you time to learn exactly what content you need to really focus your studying on, and or it helps reveal some of that information that you forgot to or missed on your studying, and still have time to get some practice in before exam day. That way you can solidify that information beforehand. On top of this, with group studying, it is so much nicer when it comes to finals week when you aren't just sitting with yourself in a room for almost 2 weeks straight, or 1 entire week, even a couple days if you're really trying to cram for it. Instead, having that nice group mentality, being able to laugh and have fun, you are able to encourage each other to take breaks, and it just makes finals week much more enjoyable overall. Once this preparation is complete, it all comes down to exam day. Now, on exam day, I try not to do any intense studying. Although it seems very tempting at times, I've found that it really doesn't help much because the information doesn't tend to stick. Even so, I do try and do a little bit of passive studying as I'm building up to the exam by just doing a quick skim over the learning objectives review sheet that I had made, and maybe doing a little bit of active recall practice with some of the concepts that I know that I struggled on. This little bit of passive practice, I usually try to stop around a half hour to an hour away from the exam start time. This will give your brain a chance to just get a little bit of rest and will hopefully give you some energy going into the exam. So just make sure that even if you get some of that last minute studying in to ensure that you have some of the concepts down, try to give your brain a break before exam time. All in all, this is how my average studying schedule for DPT school tends to play out. Well, I didn't cover every single type of content you may run into in DPT school in this video. Hopefully it still provides you that bit of information that can bring your studying to the next level. If you've been changing your study methods a ton and you haven't seen much progress, it might be time to change the environment in which you study in. Try and find a convenient and quiet spot, such as the library, maybe it's your room in your apartment, that you know that you can dedicate directly to studying, because doing so might help you find that increase in focus over time as you return to that location. Hopefully what you saw in this video can give you a great starting point for your studying to find success in the classroom. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe down below. If you want to see these studying methods in action, please make sure to check out my day in the life content as well. Thank you so much for watching. This has been KBDPT. I'll see you all in the next video.